Welcome to this session about AI and democracy. Last December, ChatGPT went public, and since then there's been an intense debate about the possibilities and the challenges connected to AI. How reliable and trustworthy is this technology? Will AI widen the gap between those who master the technology and those already underrepresented? These are some of the perspectives we're going to discuss today. And joining us from Quebec, Canada, and Mila Institute is Alison Cohen, Applied AI Projects Lead in AI for Humanity. From Gothenburg, Daniel Gillblad, co-director and scientific lead of AI Sweden. And here in the studio with me, Tony McCarrick, Senior Digital Analyst, Advisor at Atea. Welcome, all three of you. Daniel, I'd like to start with you and a sort of overriding question. Would you say that AI could strengthen democracy?
Yes, I really at least hope it will. The jury is a little bit out on that one, but fundamentally, if we go back to these models like ChatGPT and things like that, they will allow people to have even better access to information, better access to knowledge, easily explained, raise the skills for everyone, writing, participation in public life, etc., provide better and easier access to all kinds of public services and so on. But as with all AI and democracy, it's a lot about equal access for all, equal access to the opportunities that these technologies provide, basically. So what services do we actually put into use into society? How do we manage, for example, monetization so that we don't create information bubbles, which could even be stronger with these type of technologies, and make sure that the right, correct information gets out to everyone and that everyone has access to these tools, basically.
So there is a possibility, but there are also some challenges, and we have to sort of get this right. Alison, what do you say when you hear Daniel? Do you agree with him?
I do tend to agree with him. Although I will caveat by saying it's very important to think about who is in the table, at the table, making these decisions about how our technology is being developed, because democracy might not be their priority. It might be, but do we want to leave it up to these folks that are developing our tools to be the ones deciding whether the impact is net good or net problematic? And I think that speaks to sort of the need for more multidisciplinary players engaged in the AI design process, who can bring that nuance to the table, who can bring those values to the table as well. I think what we're too often seeing among the development teams is an emphasis on the technical skills and not enough of an emphasis on the social sciences and other areas of reflection that would allow for more of a alignment with the values of democracy.
But this is actually sort of a core mission for you at Mila, right? And you work in a very interdisciplinary way. Could you tell us something about the sort of concrete reality of that? How does it work?
Yes, I'd be happy to. So on all of the projects that fall within my portfolio, we make sure to have multidisciplinary folks around the table at the very least, but also to include marginalized perspectives. So people coming from communities that the tool is going to impact and may in some cases impact them in adverse ways. And the idea is by bringing together this multidisciplinary group, it changes the way that the group determines its values. The values become placed much more on a plurality of opinions and integrating those opinions into the design process, trust building, community building, and then that ethos is sort of influencing the way that we roll out the tools as well. So I think that has significant implications for the democratic nature of the projects that are being deployed.
This can always also be seen as a quite advanced and sometimes difficult technology, where software engineers, for instance, one might think would play a more important role. So what would you say? Whose expertise weighs the most?
I think people are often surprised to find that software engineers, though they have a very important role to play, a lot of the decisions that they're making should be influenced by folks with domain expertise. Questions that may seem incredibly technical, like where do we get our data and what should our data look like, should in fact be informed by those with an understanding on the ground of what this looks like and some of the challenges that it might present.
Tony, you've
Yes.
been working with digitalization and AI solution in a very hands-on way in
Yes.
the municipality of Södertälje.
Yeah.
What would you say are the key factors for success, for making this work?
Well, I think a few of the key factors, as Alison has mentioned here, that you have to get different perspectives. What kind of problems are you trying to solve? And in Södertälje, where I worked, we tried to ask the questions, how do we make the municipality cleaner? How do we make things more accessible? How can we work with real-time data so people can find out, where am I going to throw my rubbish, or where am I going to be a sustainable person? So I think the perspective is a really big question. I think in this time of rapid change, we have a chance here to stand a moment and think, what type of society do we want? We're in charge, so we have to really want to enforce the perspectives. What do we want to do? What's important? Do we know what our citizens want? Do we know how to get there? What does quality look like? Do we know it if we see it? That kind of stuff.
And how do you sort of know what to develop, with which path to choose?
Well, sometimes you don't know. In Södertälje, we tried to focus on the question, what's the problem that you want to solve? And one of them was just we wanted a cleaner Södertälje. So that's why we put sensors from Internet of Things and connected them up, and that meant that we could get it cleaner and that kind of stuff. But also working a lot with real-time data and giving people access to information so they could make informed decisions at the time when they wanted to do it. So they could act sustainably, or they could make the choices. And we live in a world of real-time data, and of course the quality of data is important. So you have to keep your ear to the floor, as they say, and I think you have to use many different types of concepts, or new concepts. What does a conversation about these type of questions look like? How do you create them? There's not one answer, many different ways. Keep your ear to the floor. I think that's important.
We'll stick to the concrete examples.
Yes.
Alison, you are working very hands-on with AI as a tool for addressing a quite serious societal problem, the one about trafficking. Could you elaborate a bit on what you're doing, what you try to achieve?
Yes, absolutely. So right now I'm working with a team on a human trafficking or anti-human trafficking tool called Infrared. The idea is that we're using artificial intelligence to identify patterns on the online escort market as a way of creating a thoughtful and meaningful intervention in this space. And of course, with the domain of human trafficking, a lot of it is clandestine, of course, so it's very hard to get accurate information in terms of numbers and trends and other information on how perpetrators conduct their work. So it's been very important for us to engage directly with survivors of human trafficking. And in order to do that meaningfully, we actually had to attend a workshop around what it meant to be engaging with end users in a way that allows for them to really be partners on the project so that they can contribute as much as possible. And for us, that meant giving them proper credit, giving them, making sure we had their consent in the data that we're collecting and how we distribute it, but also compensating them properly. And I think that those are really important elements to consider when comparing how traditional AI technology is being built, where all this data is collected on us, and frankly, none of those C's are being achieved, so to speak.
You're nodding, Daniel. What do you want to say when you hear about this example from the reality of Alison in Quebec?
No, I think it's a great example of actually implementing these things to basically benefit society and humanity as a whole. And I think that's also part of the things that we really, really need to achieve. Alison, you said earlier that we need more players involved in developing these technologies. I fully agree. Not only that, we also need, as technology developers and engineers, take more responsibility for the societal consequences of the technologies that we actually develop. And in part, that might actually be relatively easy. These skills are in high demand. We can go to places and work with problems very often that actually mean something for society. So I do think that we have the potential to solve these really, really interesting and really, really important problems for society if we just choose to do so.
Does that mean, Daniel, that the society, sort of speaking, has to step up and not rely on the market to sort this out and bring us the latest tech solutions?
Yeah, absolutely. I really do think so. I think we really in society need to view AI as a transformative technology. If we leave it fully to the market, of course, we're going to get a certain type of solutions. We might end up with something that is, in a sense, economically efficient, but perhaps not the best solution for society, our citizens, and solutions that actually support democracy, actively support it. So, yeah, more open solutions, both for research and understanding these things, for transparency, to build services for everyone, and perhaps more solutions developed by the public sector and other types of organizations.
Right now, maybe not that much development, but for sure discussion about regulations from policymakers. What do you say, Alison? How do you draw a line between what is necessary to protect the citizens and what could actually sort of be an obstacle for innovation and economic growth?
So I think the point that Daniel made was fantastic, which is that the market isn't naturally going to lead to the types of solutions that we'd like to see. And so in my mind, when policymakers make the case that we don't want to, prematurely institute regulation that might actually curb or change economic growth, the reality is the capitalist system is already informing the types of applications we're seeing deployed. So if we want to make a concerted effort to have very, more beneficial technology developed, that's something that we need to create with regulation, because an incentive system already exists. If we want to interrupt it, we need to use a different incentive system. And in fact, the existing capitalists, framework in which these AI tools are being developed is actually leading to monopolies in a lot of cases, which is also bad for economic growth. So I'm starting to find it more and more difficult to believe that that is in fact a trade-off that we need to make between economic growth and human rights. I think human rights just allows us for a better framework through which to grow and develop these AI tools.
What do you say about that, Tony?
I think that we have a lot of choices ahead, and we have to, think about what's important and what's not important. What are the solutions, the problems we want to solve, and what are not? And I think it's important with the global perspective, because these are things that affects all parts of society globally. So the opportunity, we can learn a lot from each other. So I think let's take the moment.
But
and think again.
On the same hand, you told me before that don't go looking for the Holy Grail.
Yes.
And what do you mean by that?
I think sometimes people or organizations, they want to get the perfect answer that answers everything. I think the world doesn't look like that. I think for a municipality, how can we make things better now? That doesn't mean that you can't think ahead. You can work now and you can work later on. I think an important part is to help organizations with what is AI and what is it not? What can we expect and what should we not expect? And how quick is it going to happen or how quick is it not going to happen? So it's a lot about understanding the time we're living in, and so we have it's an exciting time.
It's an exciting time. Speaking about giving an advice, what kind of advice do you, Daniel, normally give to the ones who ask you?
Well, it's changed in the last few weeks, haven't it, a little bit? Because I think there's a lot of stress right now, right, out in the system, right? Everybody needs to develop AI right at the moment. But just connecting together to what we discussed earlier, basically, an advice is basically keep your eyes on the services, the tools, the solutions that actually provide value and also societal value. Don't just rush into using these tools for whatever you might need to use them for. Think about For example, if you're going to develop AI tools for healthcare, what kind of healthcare system do we actually want, and what kind of tools do we need to build that, and in what places, basically? So that, yes, we can build a lot of stuff today, but keep in mind that we want to build the right things for the future.
Okay, finally, Alison, a very short answer, but please give us something, a description of what gives you hope right now.
I think it's been amazing to see so many advocates for a robust, ethical, end-to-end sort of interdisciplinary AI design process getting so much traction in the mainstream. And so I'm talking about people like Joy Buolamwini, Timnit Gebru, Kate Crawford, Sasha Costanza-Shock. Their work is seminal in this space, and it's fantastic to see that that is hopefully galvanizing people about the need for socially responsible AI. We're also seeing fantastic applications of AI in the context of a democracy, AI tools being used by governments, and then also developments on the regulatory side coming from the European Union, but also even from Canada. There's been a number of developments coming out that I think should give us some hope that policymakers are looking to move faster on these types of questions.
So there's reason for being optimistic about the future. I think that's a great way of ending this discussion. Thank you so much, Alison, Daniel, and Tony, and thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye.